my name is Tess Parentoni, and I'll be teaching you clarinet for the next few weeks. Sorry about my surroundings. I currently have to practice in my basement while I'm home from college, so bear with me there. Okay, so in today's lesson, we're going to be learning the concert B-flat 5-note scale, and then I'm going to be giving you some practice tips that I wish I knew when I was in middle school. Sounds good? Awesome. So we're going to start with the concert B-flat 5-note scale. So I'm sure you already know this, but if your band director says we're going to play our concert B-flat scale, we know that as clarinet players, we have to play a C. So we have to start our scale on C and play a C scale on the clarinet. Make sense? Why? It's very complicated, but that's just how it is. So we're going to start in measure 1, and just 4 quarter notes, so that's pretty easy. And it's going to go C, D, E, F. So if you need to review on what those notes are, you play the C, you have your thumb on this back key, and then you go 1, 2, 3, and that's your C. And then for your D, you just lift up this finger, you lift up your ring finger like that, and then to go to the E, you lift up your middle finger, and then to go to F, lift up your pointer finger, and simple as that. So you're just going to go C, D, E, F. Make sure you keep that back finger down, all right? So I'm going to play measure 1, and then we'll play it together, okay? So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to breathe on count 4, okay? So again, I'm going to play it, and then we'll play it together. Just measure 1. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, we're going to play it together now. Ready? Remember to breathe on count 4. 1, 2, 3. Awesome. So you might see me bouncing up and down. So that's just so I can make sure we're playing together, because you know your band director's not here conducting us, and if you tap your foot, we can't see each other's feet. So I'm just going to do this to make sure that we know we're playing together. Awesome. So if you need to practice that a little more, you can feel free to pause the video. You can feel free to pause the video at any time if you need to go over anything or practice anything. So now we're going to look at measure 2. So again, it's just 4 quarter notes like it was in measure 1, but the notes are different this time. So we're going to start on G. So G, there's no fingers down, just completely open. And then we already know F, E, and D. So it's going to go G, F, E, D. Okay? So I'm going to play it, and then we'll play it together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. All right, now we're going to play it together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Awesome. Okay, so we notice a little bit of a difference between measure 1 and measure 2. Measure 1 doesn't have anything, so we're gonna, no kind of like articulation marks or anything, so we just assume we're gonna tongue it, right? But measure 2 has a big slur mark. So measure 1, we don't have a slur mark, so we articulate everything or we tongue everything. So it's gonna sound like this. All right? And then measure 2 has a big slur mark, so we're not going to tongue all the notes. We tongue the G. When we go from F to G, we are going to tongue that. But after we get to the G, we're not going to tongue it. Does that make sense? So it's going to sound like this. Does that make sense? So make sure that you do tongue the first G and then slur the rest down. So listen to it again. Alright? Awesome. Now that we know the difference between that, so we're going to add measure 3 on. Measure 3, super easy. Just a whole note C. And we already know what C is, the back finger, and then all 3 of these. So we're going to play from measure 2 all the way to measure 3. And make sure that you take that slur mark all the way to the C, even over the bar line, because it's written that way. So we have to go all the way to the C. Alright? Remember, I'm going to play it first, and then we'll play it together. 1, 2, 3. All right, remember to hold the C for 4 whole counts. All right, let's play it together now. Ready? 1, 2, 3. So now we're going to go all the way back to measure 1, and we're going to play the whole B flat major, but our C major 5-note scale. All right? Remember, if you have to pause it all to practice anything or go back over any fingerings, you can do that now before we go over everything. All right? So I'm going to play it first, and then we're going to play it together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's do it together now. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Awesome. So now we know our B flat major. We know the concert B flat major, but our C major 5-note scale. So now I'm just going to go over some practice tips that I've learned through my years of playing the clarinet that I wish I knew when I was in middle school. So while we just learned a scale, first things first is scales. I know that they can be boring and they're the last thing that you want to practice when you're practicing your instrument. But they're really important to be able to learn a lot. Because first of all, you don't want to be the one that when your band director says, let's play the concert B flat major scale, and then you don't know how to play it. That's a little embarrassing. But besides that, let's say you're playing this piece in your band, and you have this spot that, since we play the clarinet, we do have to play a lot of fast notes a lot of the time. So you have this spot coming up that has a bunch of fast notes, and you're like, wow, this is going to be really hard. But you notice like half of it is just like a C major scale. So now it turns out to be a lot easier, right? Because if you practice your scales, you know how to play the C major scale and all that other kind of stuff. So I know it's boring, but you have to make sure you do it. There's plenty of ways that you can make the scales more fun. You can do different rhythms, so you can make fun little songs out of the rhythms, or you can change up your articulations, like how in our scale, we tongued the first measure and then we slurred the second measure. You can switch it around. You could slur the first measure and tongue the second measure, or you can change it from note to note. You can slur 2 notes together and then tongue 2 notes, and anything you want to keep it interesting. I know sometimes when I want to practice, I'll be watching like a TV show and then the commercials will come on, and then I just play through a scale while the commercial is on. So that way, if you're thinking about it, you watch a TV show, it's like 30 minutes long, maybe, and then you practice one scale. It can be the same scale, it can be different scales, but you practice one scale every time a commercial comes on. You're going to get some pretty good practice at doing a scale, and you don't have to sit down and play it for a really long time. So breaking it up like that, I find, is really important. So just like how you can break up not playing the same scale for a really long time, you can break up how many scales you play in a day. Because maybe your band director gives you a big list of all these scales and says we need to learn all these scales, but you don't want to play every scale every day. That's a lot of scales, and that's going to take a really long time. So what I like to do is I like to play a couple scales, maybe 2 or 3. You can just do one if you're kind of busy that day, you can do just one, but making sure that you're not playing all the scales. That's a lot of scales, and nobody wants to sit down and play all the scales at once. That's a really long time. So, but make sure that you switch the scales. Don't play the same 3 scales all the time, because then you'll be really good at these 3 scales, but then when you have to play any other one, you won't know it so well. So what I like to do is you can do maybe 2 scales a day. Do like the first 2 one day, and then the next day, if you have to you can do 2 more scales or anything like that. Just switch it up. Or you can go up to your parents and say, pick one of these scales for me to play today, and you play that scale. Just switching it up. You can even make it a little competition between your friends to see who could play the scale the best, or who could learn it the fastest, or play the most scales, or play a scale faster. Who can play the scale fastest, Just making sure that you're making scales interesting, because we all know that scales can be a little boring sometimes. All right? So that's what I have about scales. So another practice tip that I have is, sorry about that, is that if you have a really hard section in your band music, don't try to play the whole thing. Because I know in middle school, I would see this really hard, like 16 measures maybe, and I would try to play the whole thing all the time, and it would be really hard, and I'd get really mad at myself because maybe I would play the first half of it really good and then the second half I couldn't play, or I would get tired, or just anything like that. But make sure that you break it up. Practice maybe one measure at a time, maybe two measures, and then you can add another measure. I like to do that to make sure that you really learn one measure at a time, and it makes it easier to chunk together. And it can be a little slow sometimes. So say you have 16 measures that are kind of hard in your band music. So maybe you can do 4 measures a day. So one day you do the first 4 measures of that hard part. So you do the first measure, you learn all the measures individually, and then you can start piecing them together one by one. I like to do that. So then you do that, and then if you're feeling good, you can go on to the next part. But if you're kind of tired and you don't want to do that anymore, you can move on to something else. You don't have to play all your hard stuff every single day, because that'll get pretty tiring. So that's what I like to do, to switch it up a little bit. And then make sure that once you do learn your hard part and you feel really good about it, make sure that you keep playing it and practicing it. Because what can happen sometimes is you learn this really hard part, but if you only play it, like say you're band director, you only play that piece once a week. But if you only play that hard part once a week, if you get to it that rehearsal, then you're going to kind of forget it. Because if you only look at, just say something like in school, like if you have this really hard subject in math, and you only do the math, like practice your math once a week, you're going to forget how to do that really hard problem. But it's the same thing with music and your scale and whatever hard measures it is. If you only play it once a week, you're going to tend to forget it, and then you'll have to relearn it all over again. And that could be a long process. So make sure that if you learn this hard part, that you keep practicing it. What I like to do is if I have this really hard part that I've learned, that I'll warm up on my clarinet, and that'll be like the first thing I play. Or maybe it'll be the last thing I play. I just play through it to make sure I can still play it. And I can go back in and practice anything if anything gets a little funky. So that way you know that you can still play it. So if your band director says, hey, let's play this hard part, clarinets, you can rip through it and you won't have to worry about it. But if you only play it once every couple days or something like that, you can still do that once you get to know it better. It gets close to your concert and you've played it a lot and you really, really know it, you can start spacing it out a little more. But make sure that you're still practicing it. That's really important. All right. So feel free to, if you want to pause this video and write any of this stuff down, that's okay. I know I talk fast sometimes, so just make sure that you're pausing the video if you need to, and I'll try to talk a little slower. That'll probably help too. So my next practice tip is actually ways to practice without even using the clarinet. I know, it's gonna be crazy. So sometimes what I like to do is if you're sick or you just had a really busy day, you don't really have time to sit down with your clarinet, what I like to do is you can just take any old pencil or pen or anything, and you put your fingers on it like it's a clarinet, and then you can sit there with your music and just you can finger through your scales, or you can finger through those hard parts that we were talking about in your band. So you can sit there and just do that. I like doing this. It's super easy, and you can get so much practicing time in without ever having to play your clarinet. Because I know if you play your clarinet too long, your lip really starts to hurt. That happens to me too. So if you want to practice something, but your lip hurts, or like I said, you're sick and you don't want to get your germs all over your clarinet, feel free to do this. Super easy. Its setup is just like a clarinet. You don't have the keys, obviously, and your pinkies don't have all those keys that they have to hit. But you can still practice, and you can play your scales through or anything like that. So that's a good trick I like to do. Or if you don't want to play, you can just pick up your clarinet and you can just finger through anything. It's the same thing with the pencil, but you actually have the clarinet in your hand. I like to do this a lot when you're band director. If your band director is working, like say with the trumpets for a really long time and you're kind of getting bored, make sure that we don't want to be distracting in rehearsal. So you don't want to start talking or anything like that. Just look through the piece and you can finger through something, or maybe if you have like your scale sheet up on your stand while your band director is doing that, you can play through some scales. You can do anything. I do this a lot, especially in rehearsals where I'm not playing for a really long time and what the band director is working with another section doesn't really apply to my music. I like to do this to keep yourself, first of all, keeps yourself entertained during rehearsal, because we all know those rehearsals where the band director is working with this one section pretty much the whole time, and you get really bored. And the first thing we want to do when we get bored in band rehearsals, we want to talk to the people around us, but we know our directors don't like that. It can be very distracting in rehearsals. So this is a really great way, I find, to stay entertained. You just go through this, or say the band director is working with the flutes on a really hard part that you know that you and the flutes play together. And you know that for sure that your band director, as soon as he works with the flutes, is going to say, all right, clarinets, we're going to play it now too. And you don't want to sit there and go, oh my gosh, I wasn't paying attention. What are we doing? Like, what measure are we at? All this kind of stuff. Because then, it's kind of wasting everybody's time. So what you can do, super easy, is if you're fingering along, you're getting extra practice time in with the flutes. So then by the time your band director gets to you, and you can just pick up your clarinet and you can just start playing it. Does that make sense? Just stuff like that. Another way that I like to practice without playing the clarinet is if you take your music home, take it home and you open up your folder and you just take out whatever piece of music you want. You can go on YouTube and you can look up recordings of other bands playing that music, and I can finger along. So like we said with the fingering along, but you're hearing the music go. So it's kind of like you're playing, so that way you know what everything sounds like. You have all the other parts behind you when you're playing, so that way you know what's going on. So that'll be I like to do that still. And then you know what the music sounds like. I like doing this especially when I get a new piece of music and you haven't really done it with band that much yet, and everybody's still kind of learning their parts. So if you know all your music, you can do that. So you can go, oh, okay, I play this with the flutes, or you're just getting used to how it sounds, or oh wow, this is gonna go really fast, so I have to make sure I practice it fast. Just stuff like that. Let me think. Other practice tips. Make sure that if you have no, excuse me again, sorry, I have the hiccups. That if you have a really hard piece of music and there's like two notes that's the whole problem out of this whole. You can play all these runs great, but there's like these two notes that you just can't do it. Something doesn't work no matter how much you go slow. Instead of playing that whole thing and getting tired and doing all that, you can just practice those two notes. So say you had a practice going from B flat to C. That's pretty hard. That's a lot of fingers to move, and that's kind of one of the hardest parts about playing clarinet is going over the break, going from like A to C or B flat to C. That's a lot of fingers. So you can sit there and you don't even have to play. You can just go finger B flat and then finger C, finger B flat, finger C. And then if you want to play, you can just go like this. Something like that. And then you'll learn those two notes really well, so that by the time you get to those runs, your fingers go, oh, I know how to do this, and then you don't have to practice the entire run over and over and over. Yeah. So I think that's pretty much it for week 1. We can go through the B flat major scale again to make sure that we still know it. That would be good because we've been sitting here for a little while. So feel free to make sure that your reed's still wet. I know it's no fun. Reeds are not fun, especially when they get really dry. They get really hard. There's another practice tip I have. If your reed gets really hard to play, you can take it off the clarinet. Just take it off like this and stick it in your mouth. Get some spit on it. I like to wet both ends of the reed. You don't have to. It's just what I like to do. And then you can stick it back on your clarinet and then take your time, make sure you don't break your reed. Breaking your reed is the worst. So make sure you take your time, put it back on, make sure it's lined up right, and then put it back on. And then most of the time you'll probably sound better, because a lot of the times, especially if we don't play for a certain amount of time, our reeds will get dry and then they get really hard to play, and you get that weird like crackly sound that we all don't like, and we go, what's wrong with my clarinet? There's nothing wrong with your clarinet. It's probably just your reeds dry. So now that we re-wetted our reeds, you can feel free to pause the video if you need to wet yours a little more. That's okay. So we're going to go back to our scale and make sure that we can still do it. So we're just going to, remember, I'm going to play through it, and then we'll play through it together, and then we'll end the lesson there. All right? So here we go. Me and then us. All right, are you ready? Let's play it together now. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Awesome. So that's the end of our lesson for week 1. I'll see you next week, and make sure that you keep practicing those scales our B flat scale like we went over today, and see if you can start utilizing some of the practice tips that I gave you. So I'll see you next week. Bye.